Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely pumped to have you here today because, well, we are mapping out a truly wild, totally contradictory, and honestly just deeply fascinating journey. We're going to unpack the life of Raghunath Cappo, most people just call him Ray, to uncover some incredibly profound truths about the human ego. I mean, we're talking about a life path that weaves through the chaotic, sweaty energy of hardcore punk rock right into the total renunciation of an Indian ashram, and then somehow into the intense physical combat of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Sounds like three completely different lifetimes, doesn't it? But incredibly, they all point to the exact same realization.
Okay, let's dive right into this. What could a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner possibly have in common with a celibate Indian monk? On the surface, absolutely nothing. I mean, one is literally engaged in physical combat, actively trying to choke out an opponent, and the other is sitting in total silence, avoiding all worldly conflict. But the answer to this paradox is actually the foundation of our entire explainer today. Both of them are utilizing radical, super intense methods to strip away the ego and find ultimate spiritual peace. So let's look at exactly how physical conflict somehow leads to this crazy level of Zen.
Chapter 1. The Mat. Finding Peace in Combat. To really get this, we kind of have to compare striking arts with jiu-jitsu. With striking arts, think boxing or Muay Thai, you inherently have physical distance. The goal is, quite literally, to knock the other person's head off. And that naturally breeds a bit of animosity, not to mention constant physical trauma. But jiu-jitsu? It completely forces this intense physical closeness. You are grappling. You are deeply, deeply vulnerable. You have to place total mutual trust in your training partner that they aren't going to snap your arm when they catch you in a lock. That intense body contact completely breaks down our normal human barriers. It literally turns your opponents into your absolute best friends.
Actually, there's a popular saying on the mat: you're playing a game, I'm trying to kill you, you're trying to kill me, but we're really good friends. Which, let's be honest, sounds completely unhinged to an outsider. But think about it. When you go full blast in a deadly game, it requires such absolute focus and brutal honesty that it completely strips away your ego. You just can't fake it on the mat. You're either tapping out or you're surviving. And when that ego totally vanishes, what's left behind is this pure, peaceful, incredibly deep camaraderie.
And the wild thing is, this training translates to real life in unbelievable ways. Take Ray's absolutely insane first date with his now wife in Santa Monica. So they walk out to his convertible Saab at midnight, only to find a carjacker actively trying to start the ignition. Now, instead of panicking, Ray, who, by the way, was soaking wet at 147 pounds on a raw vegan diet at the time, simply hands his date his jacket, calmly jumps on the back of the car, slips behind the guy, and engages in a 3-minute grappling stalemate. No rage, no screaming. They eventually crash through the car windows, and the guy literally runs away in his socks. That intense, deadly physical conflict practiced daily on the mat gave Ray this Zen-like, totally detached calm during a highly dangerous real-life encounter.
Chapter 2. The Ashram. Radically Pivoting the Ego.
Let's rewind a bit to look at Ray's evolution. At 16 years old, he's starting punk bands in New York. By the 1980s, his band Youth of Today hits massive international success. I mean, they're the literal pioneers of the straight-edge hardcore scene. But right at the peak of his fame, tragedy strikes. His father falls into a 3-year coma and eventually passes away. This absolutely devastating event, combined with Ray's sudden realization that all his fame and international tours just couldn't fill what he called a God-shaped hole in his heart, pushed him to completely abandon his music career. So at age 22, at the absolute height of his success, he quits everything and travels to India to become a monk. Just think about the massive contrast here for a second. In his past life, he was an absolute rock star, chasing material success, collecting incredibly rare punk records, constantly feeding this ego-driven pleasure and fame. Then compare that to his new reality in India. We're talking 6.5 years completely celibate, taking freezing cold showers from a rooftop tank, going to bed at 8:30 p.m. and waking up at 3 a.m. He stripped away all creature comforts and modern entertainment. And you know what? He discovered that when you remove everything that artificially eases the pain of existence, you are forced to find a much deeper, far subtler joy, one that just isn't dependent on anything external. And it brilliantly illustrates that shift. Before he fully left for India, Ray had this massive collection of rare, highly valuable punk records, but he had this profound realization. The only pleasure he actually got from them was when someone else came over and said, "Wow, do you have that record? You're so cool." It was purely ego. So what did he do? He took thousands of dollars worth of these prized, mint-condition records and literally threw them out into the crowd during a show. It was a real game changer for him, his first major psychic surgery, completely shattering his ego-driven concept of pleasure and identity.
During this time, he was deeply moved by a Swami who said, "The soul is pure, but it gets covered by lust,
greed, anger, and envy. Now, Ray initially thought, well, hold on, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I'm a vegetarian punk, I'm not greedy. But as his band had gotten bigger, he realized he actually did want more money. He was envious of other bands. He realized that even as a straight-edge, highly disciplined person, he was still plagued by these really subtle diseases of the soul. True spiritual work wasn't just about what you didn't consume physically. It was about putting the microscope on your own hidden flaws.
Chapter 3. The Environment, Consciousness, and Connection.
Okay, moving into the Vedic tradition, there is this totally fascinating concept called prasad. It basically states that the missing ingredient, like the ultimate hidden vitamin in our food that no one ever talks about, is actually love and consciousness. According to this philosophy, food actually absorbs the vibration and the consciousness of the cook. So it's not just calories we're talking about here, it is literal energy. If you eat food that's grown, prepared, and offered to the divine with love, you are absorbing that exact state of mind. Let's ground this concept for a second by looking at how we source what we eat today. Modern fast food, it's entirely divorced from nature. It's usually prepared by someone who might be underpaid, frustrated, or just operating at a really low vibration, which results in totally numb consumption on our part. Now compare that to the extreme opposite, hunting an animal in the wild. It requires this intimate, exhausting connection to nature. It literally forces you to look an animal in the eyes, recognize the heavy weight of its life, and feel a profound, high-consciousness gratitude for every single bite you feed your family. You are deeply, deeply aware of the cycle of life, rather than being blissfully numb to it. And speaking of our connection to the external environment, I absolutely love this quote from Joe Rogan. He was discussing this awe-inspiring trip to the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, where he looked out at a sky completely free of light pollution. He said, you look at it and all of a sudden you have a fresh perspective. We're a part of the infinite. It's so true, right? When we completely divorce ourselves from undeniable, majestic nature, when we only stare at our screens or concrete buildings, we become incredibly egocentric. We start thinking our tiny human problems are the absolute center of the universe. Encountering untouched, raw nature just instantly strips that delusion away and humbles us.
Chapter 4. The Mind, Action Without Attachment.
To kick off this final section, we first have to grasp the concept of the jiva. The jiva is the eternal soul. And the core teaching here is that you are not your passing thoughts. You are not your physical body. You are a spirit that is simply driving a temporary vehicle. I mean, think about it. Just like you wouldn't confuse your actual self with the Honda Civic you happen to be driving, you shouldn't confuse your eternal self with the temporary anxiety, anger, or ego generated by your mind and body. They are completely separate. So, the crucial point is, what on earth do we do with this vehicle while we are here? Well, the Bhagavad Gita actually offers principles that apply perfectly to our modern lives. The text doesn't tell you to just run away and hide in a forest. No, it says, do not give up your natural duties or talents. Instead, perform your work, whether you're a podcaster, an artist, a mechanic, or a parent, as a spiritual offering. Remove your ego entirely from the outcome. Use your specific skills to uplift others, not just to aggrandize yourself. Basically, stay in the world but operate within it without being completely attached to those ego-driven results.
Now, you might be wondering how this applies to our daily mental struggles. Well, this framework is actually the ultimate cure for imposter syndrome. Step 1 is simply recognizing that imposter syndrome is literally just your ego trying to make you the center of attention by focusing purely on your own insecurities. Step 2, shift your focus entirely away from your self-image and put it directly onto the craft itself. And step 3, become ruthlessly self-critical. Not out of self-loathing, mind you, but to better serve your audience. If you stop worrying about how you look and start worrying entirely about the service you are providing, I promise you that imposter anxiety just completely evaporates.
Comedian Cat Williams famously said, "I'm not a fan of me." Now, I know that sounds kind of negative at first, but it is actually a state of profound artistic mastery. Because when you aren't obsessed with being your own biggest fan, when you aren't constantly coddling your own ego, you can actually be appropriately critical of your work. You can refine your art to genuinely serve the crowd, rather than just using the stage to pump up your own self-worth. Removing the ego is literally what allows you to deeply and authentically connect with other people. And that entire wild journey brings us to a deeply provocative thought about karma and how we choose to live our lives. Here it is. If you had to live this exact life over and over again for eternity, would you be terrified or would you be grateful? It's a really heavy question, isn't it? If the idea terrifies you, well, that's the ultimate wake-up call to evaluate your daily actions. Are you building a reality, a mindset, and a level of connection that you would actually want to inhabit forever? Take a moment to really think about that and what you might change today to make your answer grateful. Thanks so much for learning with me today on The Explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.